many times shoot your own people. And in fact, of the 10 Israeli soldiers that were killed during the 22-day attack in Gaza a year and a half ago, 5 of them were killed by friendly fire, by fire of their own military. So these are questions that really need to be answered, and they can only be answered with having all of the evidence that's out there from all of the video cameras and all of the cameras and making up a timeline. We were taken, well, all of the ships, all 6 of the ships were boarded, were turned toward the port of Ashdod, and were slowly moved in the direction of the port. Ours was the first one to get there 8 hours later. Some of you all may have seen me on TV. I was one of the first ones off of our boat, and the Israeli military was filming that, and that film got on international TV very quickly. We were processed at a facility right there on the port for, well, it took about 2 hours. The first question was asked, why did you enter our country illegally? And of course the answer was, well, you kidnapped us. That's why we're here. We didn't want to come to Israel. We had medical, they did a quick medical evaluation, interrogation by various groups of people, then put in prison vans and then taken to a prison that was out in Beersheba, just outside of Beersheba. It's a brand new prison. They told us we were the very first people to go into it. In fact, it was, it still had a lot of construction materials in it, and prison guards are the same all over the world. I mean, whether you're in a jail in Washington, D.C., which I've been very frequently, or whether it's a prison in Israel, the guards are the same. We guards don't sweep. If you want this thing cleaned out, here's the broom, sweep it out. So that's what kept us busy for the first couple of hours. We ended up being there for about 48 to 55 hours, depending on which group you were in. After, it was in the second day that finally consular officers from the embassies representing all of the passengers finally were allowed to come in. At that point, we gave our statements to them about what had happened. From our point of view, we were demanding that our goods be given back to us, our earthly possessions. Not that many of us had a lot of them on the ships, but I essentially came back to the United States with a pair of slacks, a t-shirt, a pair of shoes, and a passport. And everything else is someplace. The Israelis government did make an attempt at some level to return some luggage. It was primarily from the, well, it was all from the Marvi Marmara. As the commandos were going through the ship, they were emptying out everything. Everybody's suitcases, everything dumped out, all of the goods that were, supplies that were on the ship were cut open, you know, because they were looking to see what was on there. And then the directive came, I guess, from Tel Aviv saying, we're going to send some of this luggage back, so pack it up. And you know how 18-year-olds are, even in their own home. Pack it up, fine. So it was just whatever they could grab, throwing it into whatever they found. And when we arrived 48 hours later or so in Istanbul, Turkey, when we were finally left the prison, we were taken to Ben Gurion Airport. It took a long time to get everybody. By that time, it was about 700 people that they were moving from prison through the airport to do the processing there to deport you. The Turkish government, in the meantime, because they were very outraged about the deaths of 8 of their citizens, 1 American citizen, although he was of Turkish parents and had lived most of his life in Turkey, but he still was an American citizen. And then the 50 that had been wounded, many of them very seriously. In fact, I think it was 8 of them were so seriously wounded that they could not be moved back to Turkey when the rest of us went back. They brought Turkish doctors in to be in the Israeli hospital with them, as well as Turkish diplomats. And they did not stabilize for several days. They were so severely injured, but finally taken back to Turkey. The Turkish government flew in 3 really big passenger aircraft and left it on the tarmac at Ben Gurion Airport for about 15 hours. And as people were being processed from the prison through the airport, then they were taken to the airliners and placed in the airliner. The airliners they all 3 left at once, which was at 1:30 the next morning. Our group of 11 women were some of the last ones to be processed out of the airport. The airport was probably it was a very tough place. There were a lot of beatings that took place. There were 2 American citizens that were beaten at the airport. Paul Arudi, who is a PhD linguistics person, and Ken O'Keefe, who happens to be from Honolulu. His mother runs a dive shop up at Haleiwa. Ken is quite an activist. He was the captain of the very first Free Gaza boat that went into Gaza in 2008. Previously, when the U.S. was about ready to bomb Iraq in 2003, he was living in London, and he decided that he would see if people wanted to go with him to be human shields in Iraq. And he took a whole double-decker bus load of people all the way from London all the way to Baghdad, and they were there to be part of an international presence to try to get the United States to stop from bombing Iraq. You may have seen Ken on TV. He did not wipe the blood off his face. It was cake blood that you saw when he was interviewed on Democracy Now! Virtually every uniformed group, whether it be immigration, military, customs, whatever, they were all there. And it was not a pretty sight. I mean, everybody was being very, very rough on everyone, to include us 11 women. As we were kept in the prison van that brought us from the prison to the airport, kept in that van for 5 hours without water and without being able to get out to go to the bathroom. And even though there were hundreds of people within this far to the van, and as we were beating on the walls of the van saying, we'd like to have a little water, we'd like to go to the bathroom, something like this, nobody would come. If anybody had had a seizure or a heart attack, they would have died where they were. It was not a stellar performance, I would say, from that group of people. And as we were brought out of the van and were walking up the stairway into the airport, all of a sudden one hand came out from this group of people and slugged one of the Greek women. And then when we went on upstairs, it was very hostile, very, very hostile.
Is this in Israel?
That was, yes, at Ben Gurion Airport. We were some of the last ones to get processed out, and finally got on board the planes about 1 in the morning, and final count was taken by organization of who was where, did we have any missing people, and then trying to account where they were. And then by 1:30 we took off and then headed for Istanbul. All 3 planes, passengers plus 1 medevac flight that was carrying some of the wounded, and also the bodies of the 9 people. We landed in Istanbul about 3:30, and there were tens of thousands of Turkish citizens from Istanbul that were lining the roads from the airport to the medical center. We were there in the medical center for about 6 hours, and then taken to hotels, and then stayed 1 more day, and then the Turkish government paid for us to fly back to wherever we were from. My onward ticket was out of Athens, Greece, but I had not been taken there, so the Turkish government actually flew us home. So what happened? What was the result of all of this? 9 people killed, 50 injured. There was an international outcry against the brutality by the Israeli military. And as you saw on this video, there were demonstrations.